welcome to the Arcade Veteran. We're going to look at the history, the specs, ODE options and play a few games on my SEGA Saturns. This is the first Japanese model SEGA Saturn, as you can see on screen. First model I owned, it was actually an import. Got it about a year before the European launch. Absolutely loved it. It was a choice between the PlayStation and the SEGA Saturn. I decided to go with the Saturn. There's all my different models I currently own. Just going through all the different models, too many to really display individually. As you can see, there's quite a different selection. But this is Cool One's really nice. It's one of my favourite ones. This is my custom Saturn. It's been custom painted, region modded, power supply modded, and has Fenrir ODE modification inside, which we'll talk about later. That's my joypad controller, wireless joypad controller. As you can see, it's modified at the back. The Saturn architecture was pretty unique. We'll go over the main points. Two Hitachi SH2 processors running at 28.6 MHz. Best off just pausing this and reading through what the actual circuitry has. This is a picture of my different ODE replacements. This is the main focus of this video, is looking at the different available ODE replacements. This is the first one I bought, was the GD-EMU rear. First ODE I replaced, SD card based. Then I bought a Phoebe, same designer and manufacturer, just for the different models. This is the third one I bought, the Fenrir. Very basic, nicely operated. The Terranium mode, I'd say probably the best one, allows you to put a very big storage capacity on there. And the recently released Satiator, which replaces the MPEG card in the back of the SEGA Saturn. This is the only plug and play solution. This is the Terranium mode's graphical interface. You have a text-based interface, but I do prefer the graphical interface. This is Daytona USA on the Saturn. It's the menu. In the bottom right on the little TV is a SEGA Saturn advert of the time. I actually really enjoyed Daytona USA. It wasn't perfect. There's a massive amounts of pop-up, which really did, at the time, I was quite forgiving at the time, purely and simply because I wasn't a massive fan of Ridge Racer, and it was pretty much a toss-up between the two. I'd played a lot of Daytona USA in the arcade. I now actually own a Daytona USA cab. That's for a future video. I'm actually in the middle of restoring that unit, so at some stage you will see me putting that back together. When I've just had the casing powder coated, so we're just about ready to start that video. So I did love Daytona USA. I found this version to be a bit too quick, a bit too choppy. The gameplay was probably some of the best, the way the car handled, but as you can see, as you come down here, you see a massive amount of pop-ups start to appear, and it was very critically analysed at the time. And when you put it up against the like of Ridge Racer at the time, Ridge Racer was a lot more polished and flowed a lot better. Ridge Racer, it was a far more finished game than this. Daytona, obviously appeared to be very rushed to get it out in time for the launch of the Saturn. All the features of the arcade are there, which there's a lot of things that are very impressive. The clouds in the back of the rear windscreen, and the way the car moves, the amount of detail off and on the track. It had a lot going for it. It really did show what the Saturn could do. I fell in love with it as soon as I saw it in the shop, in the importer. I just wish they'd have spent a little bit more time making the car run a bit more smoothly. It was the controller, the Japanese joypad is obviously too small for my hands, but it was far too quick, far too choppy to really be a long-lasting game. But I enjoyed it. You can get the hang of it. It does play the best, out of all of the Saturn versions of Daytona USA. Some look graphically better, but they don't have anything near as good a gameplay as this original version. Unfortunately, I don't understand why they decided to change it. The original launch lineup for the Saturn was 6 games. It came out 4 months early, which is, you know, an industry became shocked. Retailers refused to sell it. The public wasn't ready. It was a ginormous, probably one of the most renowned, worst console launches ever in history. Probably the biggest contribution to the demise of Sega themselves, which is such a shame. You know, I don't think anybody does arcade conversions like Sega did. It's very much a shame they're not around today. This is when you win a race, you get to put your name in, and that lasts as long as the battery does in the back of the Saturn. The Saturn battery was renowned for going flat quite quickly, which was a real pain. This is the Fenrir interface. It's not a graphical interface like the mode, it's a text-based interface, which is fine. You know, it operates nice and smoothly. It does what it needs to do. It's more basic. The operation's more basic. The install's more basic. You know, but it does what it needs to do. As of yet, I've not had any of the ODE drive replacements that have caused me any issues. Like I say, the original ones have now, the original Phoebe and Rhea have both been overtaken by Terranian mode, the Fenrir, and the Satiator. The Satiator is expensive, but again, it doesn't need any modifications internally. It's a plug and play interface that slots into the MPEG card bay at the back. Does require a fully charged battery, the Satiator. I've heard a few instances where people have not been able to get it to work, and it's purely been down to the fact that the battery's gone flat in the back, which is a bit of a downside considering how often that battery goes down. My Saturn, that painted Saturn, has actually had the conversion done to replace the clock backup chip, so that even in the event of the Saturn battery going flat, it doesn't lose some of your save data and bits and bobs. So I think the clock still stops and still needs rebooting, but a lot of your other things, your save games and things, aren't lost, which was a pain of the Saturn, because obviously as soon as the battery went down, you lost all your save games. This is another favourite of mine. This is Manx TT. I actually have been to the Isle of Man and raced around the TT track, so I know that this game is not a faithful reproduction or anything to the original tracks. There are things as you go around the track that are, some of the landmarks are reminiscent of the Isle of Man TT. This bendy track we're going around now doesn't really exist. I've been there. I've actually seen this particular. It takes bits from the actual TT and uses a bit of poetic license to how they've recreated it. It's cute enough. It works. It's got the normal Sega style of arcade racer. I don't think the handling's all right. It's a bit when you can see how I'm riding that bike. That's not how you ride a bike. Dropping in like that. I'm using a standard joypad. Using the analog Sega joypad obviously would be a lot nicer, a lot more analog and fluid. But using a standard joypad, this is how you've got to race to maintain your speed and try and get up those ranks. So no, I really enjoy this. So it's a good game. I enjoyed it in the arcade. Obviously, in the arcade you had a full bike to sit on. This is as good as you're going to get, I think, on a home console. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It worked really well. So let this play out. This is actually currently being played on a plasma TV. I decided to capture it in this way rather than doing it through a capture device. You'll see the difference. I think this feels a little bit more real. The next video is the SEGA Rally, and that actually is done through a capture device, so you can actually see what that looks like in comparison. And you come third there. Disappointing. Okay, this is SEGA Rally. As you see, I'll remind you, my last video was to do with mending my twin sit-down SEGA Rally Championship. So it's interesting to make the comparisons compared to the Saturn version. Obviously doesn't hold much of a flame to the arcade power, but a really good conversion. You know, the gameplay's there. Yes, visually it's not quite there, but as you can see, you know, this is just a replay of a game I played earlier. You know, very impressed. You know, they reproduce the arcade tracks, you know, virtually perfectly. You know, I'm very versed on the arcade cab, having, you know, actually owning one. But this is a really good, you know, home conversion. You know, the cars, you know, faithfully converted. The handling's faithfully converted. You know, yes, the polygon count's not as good, but you know, I'm really impressed. You know, I think they did, you know, if this would have been available at launch instead of Daytona USA, I think the respect for the machine would have been a lot higher. You know, this is an absolutely brilliant home conversion. It carries everything from the original arcade machine. The playability, yes, they didn't bring anything new to the table, which was, you know, a lot of the Sega titles, the arcade conversions, were criticised of that. They were accused of just doing an arcade conversion, when the home version obviously does need something more. You know, you soon, you know, an arcade game is very different to a home game. An arcade game is you pump a few quid into it, you have a, you know, you have a tear-ass round, and you know, you have a good game on it and you walk away. Whereas the home version, you know, you're going to be sitting there for hours. There needs to be more meat on the bone, if you know what I mean. This didn't really bring that much more. But it was a faithful conversion, so therefore, you know, it did hold its own just about. You know, it wasn't something that was going to have a long lifespan in your game collection, but it did everything it needed to do. You know, it showed that the Saturn, with some decent programming and a bit of time, it showed that the Saturn could, you know, reproduce an arcade quality racer and an arcade conversion, which obviously Sega were renowned for doing. All of the tracks are faithfully reproduced, the power slides, you know, it really was just what it needed to be. Sega was struggling, you know, to get, there weren't many third-party developers coming on board for the Saturn, because they'd burned the way with their atrocious launch. There was a lot of developers that didn't want anything to do with them, but this was one game that proved that Sega really could produce the goods when needed. So yeah, let this play out and we'll talk about it in a minute. Okay, I hope this helps. If you're in the market for an ODE drive for the Saturn, really my roundup is that the Terran mode, if you've got a massive Sega collection of, you know, ROMs, then the Terran mode is the far easiest and best storage solution for those particular users. The Fenrir is my second choice, where it's at the right money, it does exactly what it says on the tin, it works perfectly. So like I say, if you just want it to work, then the Fenrir is the solution. My next one, if you're not a person that likes to take your Saturn to bits, if you're not prepared to pop the lid on the Saturn, then Satiator is your choice. It's a little bit more expensive, but it works perfect. It does exactly what it says it does, but like you say, it's easy because you can swap it to machine, and no hardware modification or any messing around with the unit. The problem with the Phoebe in the rear has always been trying to get hold of one. I myself ended up having to purchase one from a scalper because I just couldn't get one from the original designer and seller. His sales technique really is beyond belief. It's very hard and very unfair system he runs, but that's it. So anyway, I hope that helps. Obviously we'll see you soon, and thank you for watching. Cheers then, bye.